And just for those who aren't sure, this is just basically for anyone to ask whatever they want or to discuss whatever they want, indeed, to do with World of Warcraft. And I'm just looking actually before we're here, because Gamescom is into full swing. There has been at least one interview with Ian Hazakostas, which is related to, which was done by Trade Chat, Panzer from Wowhead. There's a few points on that. And then also just to cover a couple of things, because people keep asking me this, especially after Preach was mentioning on YouTube. None of my content has been hit. There is a bit of an issue where a load of his content has been demonetized. This is nothing new, really. This is something that YouTube introduced some time ago in the wake of Adgate, where certain types of content are being demonetized, basically, fairly or not. It's not. You can argue there's not. I mean, there's more YouTube could do, I suppose, for creators, but they're sort of, their hands are tied to a certain extent. And yeah, so, but mine's fine. You know, I don't think mine breaches any of the guidelines, the ad-friendly guidelines, apart from the fact that there are, of all these guidelines, there is one that basically says we can put a strike against any channel that we like for whatever reason. So, hi, Clifardo. Yes, we have some new additions. We have a couple of new healers, so we should now have a full-time healing team, which is good. We'd have made much more progress in Timosarges if we'd have had that from the start. We've also got a new rec, so we had one rec go out the door last week, and hiya Fraser, and another one come in this week. And Honeypants, hello. What else have we got? We got something else. Oh, we got the new tank, but the new tank was in last week. So yes. I was also after a Warlock and a Hunter, but one of them didn't accept the battle tag invitation, and the other one did, and said they would think about it, but then never came back to me and took me off the friends list. So I'm guessing they're not interested. So I'll have to do some more looking around for range DPS still. But I think that's all we really need now. We're sort of okay on everything else, I hope. I hope. Because the usual thing with summer, we started off with a large roster at the start, and we needed it. Because it doesn't get any easier in summer at any time, let alone with Legion at the moment. So, should we go through this Ian Hazakostas interview thing? So, first, this is just, I haven't actually watched the interview or anything, so this is just the points that Wowhead have made in terms of what he said. But I'll tie this in with what my view is on 7.3. Again, my great fear with 7.3 is that it's some people are overhyping it to be more than it really is. Some people are like, I hope they're not going to be disappointed. I mean, storyline-wise, what he says here is, Ian personally is looking forward to the story quests in patch 7.3 the most. He would say that because that is the big thing about 7.3. In terms of the rest of it, it's just another patch. You know, it has a raid with it. It has a new dungeon. It's the sort of stuff that if you take WoD out of the equation, we expect of a new patch. You know, but I have seen YouTubers doing some quite remarkable things. I saw Balula uploaded a video today talking about the new gearing system on Argus, and it's like there is no new gearing system. So it's like people are scratching around for things to talk about on it. So. But yeah, but the storyline is the big thing, because we haven't really had much of a storyline to do with the Draenei in World of Warcraft. We've had stuff in books and stuff like that. So, Astus, has Simcraft been updated for 7.3 yet? I wouldn't like it. I don't know that it's perfect, is what I would say. It's getting there. I think it will be okay when it goes live. The other thing I would say is you don't need it until it goes live. So I would just leave it for now. I wouldn't. I've not had anyone say, yes, it's all now fine, the Simcraft PTR. So it may be, but it equally may not be. But it doesn't really matter at the moment. You should do what we would all do anyway. If you've got any high item level pieces of gear, just keep hold of them. And then when it goes live, which, you know, it's still not on the downloader. So... You know, is it next week? If it's next week, then that 77-day between each patch thing is still in operation, but they haven't even indicated that it is next week yet. So we haven't had a date for it, and we haven't had... I mean, we may get a date. Maybe that's one of going to be the announcements. What is going to disappoint me about this Gamescom, I was expecting to be able to talk about all sorts of stuff. And I'm not sure, but there's one thing they said here. Hold on. There's a few things they talked about. One thing that was interesting. Well, I say interested, it may not be. Where was it? It was to do with raids. Oh, here we go. It says, Antorus is the final big raid of Legion. While Ian wouldn't directly say it was the final raid, he said it was unlikely there'd be a small Ruby Sanctum type raid. So what they basically is saying there is, there's not going to be another big raid as we would understand it, like large number of bosses. And there's not going to be a Ruby Sanctum type. But now I never actually did Ruby Sanctum because I wasn't playing the game at the time. I'd quit at that point. But from what I understand, it had a boss in it. It was like an Onyxia's Lair type thing, I think. I don't know. I've never been. But that doesn't... But if you read between those lines, that doesn't say that there isn't going to be a Trial of Valor type raid. So, because in my mind, if there isn't going to be an announcement about a new expansion, and there's now several people who seem to be fairly sure that's going to be the case, there was supposed to be a big announcement at Gamescom. It's now not looking likely there is going to be a big announcement. If they're just going to talk about 7.3, that, frankly, is going to be a load of rubbish. There isn't actually a lot to say about 7.3. It's a patch. It's got all the stuff you'd expect of a new patch. There's nothing really more to it than that. It doesn't have anything in it that is remarkable. So... But the thinking is the timing now, because as I say, so 7.3, let's say next week, whatever. It's going to be very late August, sorry, if it is going to be next week, or early September if it's like the week after. Then you've got Antorus, which is the raid, Antorus the Burning Throne. That has got to be late October to early to mid-November. Like, they've said that a tier should last 4 to 5 months. So that places it round about the end of October, early November. They're not going to leave it any later because then they'll be throwing it out at Christmas. Also, because they tend not to give a... They try to bring stuff out at a reasonable rate, and Legion, it's very much been about bringing it out at a fast rate. So let's say it comes out 1st of November, just for the sake of argument. That's probably not even a Tuesday, but whatever. Let's just say. And let's say... So they say that's 5 months worth. That means at the end of March, there's got to be something else. So what? If they're not going to announce the expansion now, not till BlizzCon, then that means that they can't really bring out the new expansion before round about November 2018. So we're not going to go, and that would be another content drought we'd be getting. So that's why I'm thinking they might be thinking in terms of a 3 or 4 boss raid, because then that's not a big raid, but at the same time it's not a small Ruby Sanctum type raid either. So I am thinking there is another raid coming. If he won't directly just say, unless of course, no, I mean, if there was not going to be another raid, he would just say so. He would just say, no, there's not going to be one. It could be mid to late October. What I mean is at the outside, it's going to be early November when Antorus comes out. But whenever it comes out, that's their last big raid. And there's always a good 9 months of open alpha stroke beta testing on an expansion before it goes live. Because that's one of the reasons why when the developers were sort of told we want expansions every year, the reason why that doesn't work is because Blizzard actually tests things pretty well. For all the moaning that I did and others did about a couple of aspects of Timos Algeris, by and large, and especially for expansions, the testing goes quite well. There are not usually very many problems when it goes live. Unlike some other MMOs and games like that do bring out content more quickly. Excuse me, very hot. So, if they don't announce... I just can't think of the timing. So, I mean, I suppose in theory they could announce it at BlizzCon and the alpha comes out a few weeks later. Possibly. But even if the new expansion didn't come out till, say, September, that's still 24 months. That means Legion's going to be a long expansion. So it's got to have some more content. Could they possibly do a small TOV style? Well, that's exactly what I've been talking about. That's what I think they will do. And it would also make sense, yeah, that it is a precursor to the next expansion story. Because with Tomb of Sargeras, we have stopped the invasion on Azeroth. That's it, it's finished. By going to Argus, is this still a spoiler? We finished the story anyway. There is no follow-on, or direct follow-on, I should say. So there is no raid that they can do which continues a story for Legion, or at least not the main storyline. Like, I mean, Trial of Valor, sorry, you could argue wasn't part of that main storyline because that was to do with Stormheim. I suppose they could do another raid that's based on one of the other zones, say High Mountain or something. You know, that's possible. But yeah, it's equally possible it is a teaser raid for the next expansion. Because by the time it comes out, they will have already announced the new expansion. That is certain. There's going to be a large pre-expansion patch with scenarios. Yeah, that's what I would expect. I mean, I've said this before. I never suppose that after Antorus, that's it for Legion. I always suppose that they would bring out more content, just not raid content, because it works quite nicely. Because you don't want the raid content to last all the way to the end of expansion. Because then who's going to test your expansion? You need players to play the expansion in alpha and beta. And for them to have the time to do that properly, they need to have essentially finished with that. So what do? You bring out a load of content that's essentially intended for a casual player base. And then you can do that because... I'm just going to move this over here. Nice and in the corner. Yeah, you can do that then. So, yeah, I imagine there will be. It's just it'll be the sort of content. It's how will people take to it? I don't know. Reputation mounts into the quartermaster. They are. Have you not seen what's on offer in Argus? There are 2 new factions and both of the quartermaster have mounts. So you've got your wish without us having to do anything. The most sought after mount, of course, being that light forged warframe, whatever it's called, to the Storm Drake. Is there a Storm Drake mount in Legion, or is that what you want? I'm not an expert on mounts. I don't really collect mounts, I have to say. I occasionally get mounts, and then sometimes if I like it, I will use it for a bit, and then go back to my Paladin mount. And Stone Drake mount, there is, well, there you go, there is one. They did actually say, this Lucid Nightmare map says it should be available for secret finders to puzzle through at 7.3's launch. So that's one that's a tricksy one to find. They've done a few of those in Legion. Oh, okay. I've not got any of those yet out of the rep caches. I haven't got any of those maps. Oh my god, what's happened to the sound? Beans though. Oh, sorry. Hello, John Beans, by the way. Oh my god, that absolutely scared the crap out of me. Sometimes what Blizzard do, or what they might think of doing, is at the end of an expansion when it's basically done, they may increase the drop rate of certain things, like those mounts. I don't know. They may not. So your guess is we'll expend the artifact weapon. I don't need to guess. I know how we're going to do it. It is at the start of the new expansion. Yeah, we are gonna expend our artifacts. I've sort of known that since before Legion. We are going to have to do a thing that requires that we drain our artifacts of their power. So yeah, that's a thing. But that'll be at the new expansion, of course. They can't have us remove our artifacts while... That's not going to be the pre-expansion patch, because that would mean we'd be in Legion without our artifacts. No one would do that quest. That'd be a lunatic. You know, do this quest. Oh, great, new quest. What's the reward? You get to lose your artifact. No, I don't. The reason I mainly was is because I've got some web pages open here, and just in case one of them decides, as they do, to do an audible advert, I would be able to hear it and then turn it off. Because I was looking through some posts to see if anything interesting was popping up related to Gamescom. So yeah, that's what that's for. But as I say, the nature of these websites is they get a lot of ad revenue, and some of them are quite obnoxious, these ads. But yeah, so in terms of what he's been talking about so far, obviously when he's done an interview before their keynote speech, he's not going to be giving anything away. But, you know, there really isn't a lot to 7.3. Apart from the storyline. The storyline is the big thing. The fact that there's going to be a right load of, it says here as well, and we knew this, it says even more cinematics are on the way. And there are. You know, I've done the quests on the PTR, and there's loads of occasions when the screen suddenly goes black and then it comes back again, because we can't see that they're not on the PTR. They're keeping those secret until it goes live. So there's going to be absolutely loads of cinematics. So what does he say? Yeah, so he says fans of the Suramar experience will enjoy the storytelling. In other words, the people who don't like the Suramar experience may not like Argus at all. Because some people, you know, and this is my fear, that some people will just look at Argus as... But there's new things to get there. That's why I've been gearing up my Death Knight recently, because he's my, or she is rather, my Herber and Miner, and I'm going to have to go there to Herb and Mine. So I've tried to get a little bit of gear on it. Because when I went on the PTR and the gear it had at the time, a couple of weeks ago, I got my head kicked in. Because there are, especially at the start, there's loads of mobs. It's very difficult to just pull one or two. There's loads of them. I suppose it won't be so bad if you go onto it as soon as it opens, but I won't, because at this point, it's quite clear now, hi Repal, that it's now going to be coming out, whenever it comes out now, it's now going to come out when I've gone back to work. It's really annoying. When I was sort of being given the impression that it was going to come out a bit earlier than we might have thought, I thought, oh, that's all right. Are there new crafted armor sets in 7.3? Yes, there are. I don't know about, well, sets in the normal sense. There is new crafted armor, yes. Again, using the new materials. So there's new mining nodes and stuff like that there, which you will need for the new stuff. So gatherers, you know, all of these things will... I suppose the first thing you would do with these new materials is sell them, because they'll go for quite a high price, you would think, to begin with. And the new crafted gear can be increased in item level to 935, like in an obliterum type way. Only rather than Bloods of Sargeras, it will use Primordial Sargerite, which again you get from Argus. So people are not going to be able to really miss out Argus, because you're going to need all the stuff that drops there that doesn't drop on Azeroth anywhere. It says here, nothing really new on the horizon for legendaries. This is the first time to talk about legendaries. Obviously, there is a legendary there, but that's a quest. That's for the raid. That's not coming out for months. It says Blizzard did have 2 regrets at the launch of Legion, which they think they've improved on. Drop rates too stingy at the start, and large gaps in the power and effectiveness of legendaries. Now, I'm curious about that, because this is the first time they've even mentioned legendaries since probably before Christmas, like since this year. But the last thing they did say about legendaries is they saw as the problem the throughput legendaries. They wish all the legendaries had just been those utility type legendaries. Now that concerns me for a couple of reasons. One, that I don't think, if all the legendaries were like the Speedy Boots or Cephas or something like that, Actually, no. In a world where you had the speedy boots and Cephas and some boots that heal you and stuff like that, people would all want Cephas, wouldn't they? It's very difficult not to have a gap between the best and the worst. And as I say, my fear for the legendaries in the next expansion is that they're going to use the same model. I think that's almost certain. And they will think that they are making them all of equal worth, because they always keep doing that, and they won't be. Be curious to see if old crafted gear... No, old crafted gear cannot go up to 935. You'll have to use the new stuff. You'll have to craft the new gear. That's the stuff that goes up to 935. So you'll be able to, you know, when you decide to replace it with the new gear, break down your old crafted gear with Obliterum, because you will still want Obliterum. It's just that upgrading the new gear doesn't use Bloods of Sargeras with it, it uses Primordial Sargerite. But it doesn't look like it was a particularly telling interview, if these are the main points from it, I have to say. Because all of this stuff, like this top point, as I say, about the storyline, I would have bet my bottom dollar. If I was to be asked, what do you think he's going to say is the best part of it? I would have said the storyline, because that is the best part of it. And if people aren't into storyline or questing, okay, dear, that's sad, because you're going to have to do it. Lots of catch-up mechanics. They've already talked about this. I've already talked about this. So we all knew about that. And that, of course, doesn't really affect people who've been playing since Legion. It's useful for alts. It's useful for newer players. Let's have a look here. Just the nature of legendaries in general will all have the issue of one's been OP. Yes, they will. But the problem is, at the start of an expansion, I mean, if they just make them all utility ones, in theory that could solve the problem. There will still be ones that are better than others. But the issue is that if they just make them utility, there's a danger that people won't care about them. Just means that only like 4 or 5 items that go to 935. I mean, more could come out. They could always bring more out. Hang on a minute. Are there? I'm not sure with dual crafting items. The thing is, though, you've got to bear in mind, I mean, just there's so much stuff coming out in 9.3. Doesn't mean to say more couldn't come out later. The danger is, if they just allowed all this stuff to come out in 9.3, in theory, someone who farmed a lot could get themselves... You can't have someone just crafting themselves a set of 935 gear when that's roughly the item level of Mythic Raiders at the moment. So it could be potentially deliberate that there's only so much stuff available at the moment, with more to come out later on. Maybe to coincide with the actual raid itself on Taurus. But a raid after Argos, what could it be? It could be several things. You know, there are storylines that they could just extend from the Broken Isles things. Like Suramar, I think, is done with. Obviously, the Burning Legion is done with. But you could carry on the story from High Mountain, say, or even Asuna. Blimey, that is loud, isn't it? I'm not sure what to do about that. Let us see. He said it's the last big one. That's what it says here. The last big one doesn't mean to say they can't bring in a 3 or 4 boss one. I will. So they could easily bring in a 3 or 4 boss raid like Trial of Valor. It could be Naga. It could indeed. It could be Old Gods. It could be Kulturas even. Couldn't it? We could have an attack of pirates. Right. Hang on a minute. I'm just going to have a look here. Or I'm just gonna hold on a minute. Oh, there's a sound thing there. It's okay. I don't have to muck about elsewhere. Right, good. So the next time that happens, it shouldn't scare the crap out of me again. So there's lots of things it could be. There's lots of things that are all tied together and likely to be in the the next expansion. No doubt in my mind, it's Old Gods for various reasons. But the things that go with that, I would like them to bring in playable Murlocs, but I have to say it's very unlikely. Well, that's what Old Gods are, the Void. What happened in terms of the storyline with Void Lords is, like, there's two great aggressors on Azeroth, ultimately. You've got the Void and you've got the Legion. Well, we've done away with the Legion, so there's only the Void left. And the Old Gods are basically things they sent out. They sent them out seeking out like unborn titans, basically. Planets that are basically titan souls. And it's their purpose to corrupt them. And that's what the Old Gods are. So by definition, doing an Old Gods raid is... And they have to do this. I mean, even if I didn't think it was the Old Gods before now, it has to be now. Because if you take the Legion out of the equation as this existential threat, you need another one. And I've said before, Blizzard have never really, in the game itself, properly explained the nature of the Void Lords. The Void itself. Like, what we know about it, if someone were to start talking about it, almost certainly most of what they say will have come from novels and not the game. So Blizzard have got to, like, teach us all about it now. And the way you do that is have an expansion on it. A newly undead Gul'dan. We've disintegrated him twice. Well, no, he wasn't disintegrated the first Gul'dan, was he? Just chopped his head off. Yeah, this was the problem. The actual, bringing back Nefarian and Onyxia in undead form was a stunningly bad idea. Mind you, I mean, Kel'Thas came back in the same expansion, and there was no explanation whatsoever about how that happened at all. Well, Kata wasn't... I mean, yeah, Kata was, I think, more Twilight's Hammer. Obviously, it was an Old Gods expansion. But the main enemy in that was effectively the Twilight's Hammer, wasn't it? And Deathwing, who himself was, like, corrupted by the Old Gods. Whereas it might well be that the next expansion is directly Old Gods, for which we've only really had individual patches before, like Ulduar and Anchorage. And I suppose Siege of Orgrimmar a little bit. He had a crystal in his chest. He had my sword in his chest is what he had in his chest. Actually, no, that's a lie. I was wholly on that fight. It was a hammer. It was the legendary mace, healing mace. But I'm pretty sure several other my raid mates had swords and they were in his chest. But yeah, bringing back... I mean, Illidan's sort of fine. You've got to get away with that. You don't mind that too much because of the old demon thing. But like Nefarian and Onyxia is all very... If they've not been raised from the dead and they don't have an immortal soul, it's always a little bit dodgy, the old bringing them back thing. Because once you've done that with some things, without either of those two devices, like you can do it with anyone. Old Gods is straightforward because Old Gods, you can't kill them. That's the whole premise of it. When... What's his face? I've completely forgotten now. The Titan guy pulled Yasiraj, wasn't it? Links sort of get deleted, I'm afraid. Hi, Stonebrine. You'll have to just describe it to me. They... yeah, so obviously that created the Well of Eternity, didn't it? So they can't, without damaging Azeroth, attack the Old Gods directly. We can't destroy them. Maybe they bring back Balrog. I don't know. But there's with all the old gods, they can, we can have Cthulhu back because all we did on there was defeat him. We didn't actually kill him, really. That was only a little bit of him that we beat up in Anchorage. The same thing is true of any of the old gods that we've done in. But yeah, I certainly expect Naga. I'm not sure about Queen Ashara because Blizzard keep taunting us with that. I think that's a bit of a tease. I actually also don't know why people go mad for the idea of Queen Ashara. I think it may just be because it's the only bad guy, the only villain left in the game that we haven't actually had anything much to do with in World of Warcraft. Because as far as villains go, she's not particularly interesting, I don't think, anyway. So what else was he talking about? Oh yeah, this was an odd comment. You can use relics you have stockpiled before 7.3 in the Netherlight Crucible. Well, of course you can. Otherwise, that's like saying the Netherlight Crucible doesn't even do anything until you loot a new relic. So that was a weird one. But I think that has come from the fact, that's Blizzard's fault, really. That's come from the fact a lot of people were saying, oh, will it work on our current relics? Because Blizzard was saying you shouldn't be stockpiling them. It's like, yes, we should. We should absolutely be stockpiling relics that are anything like the item level of the stuff we've got slotted. You know, give or take a bit. I don't know how much. I don't know how much item level the difference between the worst and the best you could get off the Netherlight Crucible is. Okay, so... But yeah, so there's nothing really that of major interest in that. So I guess we'll just have to wait for their speech whenever it is. Tomorrow, someone is now saying, I thought it was going to be yesterday. So I was all set tonight for be talking about what they talked about. And now today I find out that, first of all, it wasn't yesterday, obviously, because it's not been done. And I think it's probably more likely tomorrow. But also that they're not going to say anything particularly interesting, which is disappointing, if that's the case. Unless, of course, what they are going to talk about is a new what's going to come up basically after Antorus. So if they talk about what's coming after Antorus, then that's fine. Not as interesting as what I was hoping for, though. Be curious to see if our Bis relics... Oh, no. For Ret Paladin to remember, Wrath of the Ashbringer, the Crusade traits, or Avenging Wrath traits, are being nerfed. So it'll still be the Bis trait, but not by a ridiculous amount, Hijack. But I think it will still be the Wrath of the Ashbringer trait, but it won't be by loads. You won't be dropping like 10 item levels for it, for example. So I won't have to do anything particularly cunning with mine because I've already dropped 2 of my Wrath traits anyway, the Holy ones, for 940 Sisters Holy Relics. No, well, some people are now saying that they're not going to announce anything about the new expansion. No, they'd still... No, it's not because of that reason about the BlizzCon. Because for Legion, they announced Legion before BlizzCon, and yet they still had a lot to talk about. When you've got a new expansion coming out, you have got a lot to talk about at BlizzCon, no matter when you announced it. Because it's an expansion. There's loads of content. Whereas a patch, I don't think there is that much to talk about. If all they're going to do is talk about 7.3 at Gamescom, they obviously will have had to have... Actually, no. I was thinking they have to have held something back. There's something they haven't told us. But what? We know everything about it, apart from the cinematics. That's the only thing we don't know. I really don't see that they can say anything interesting with only talking about 7.3. Now, if they are going to talk about some content after Antorus, that's, that is new. That would be something to talk about. And there has to be content after Antorus in Legion, albeit it doesn't have to be a new raid tier. But there has to be some content because they can't just leave us from that up to the next expansion. Hi, Renard. Judgment versus either Blade of For the relics. No, the Judgment one wouldn't really. The Blade of Justice one will be, you know, I still think a little behind the Wrath, but not much. Like, not to the point. It might be the case now where anything half decent, you would just use it regardless, as whichever's highest item level. But we'll find that out when we can use Simcraft and be confident in it. Yes, but Guybrush, the thing is that in this one, Blizzard have set a lot of store for Legion in there's going to be lots of content and it's going to come at a fair pace. That has been their call for Legion. It's like, no one can argue. Some people obviously don't necessarily like the way some of the content has been implemented and might not straight out like some of the content in Legion, but no one can really say that they haven't stuck to their word and brought out lots of content in stark contrast to Warlords of Draenor. However, for all the good work they've done in Legion, if they left us with nothing between Antorus and the new expansion, that would be another content drought, and all of that work through Legion would be forgotten. Because it was, oh look, yet another content drought. So there's no way they can do that. There's no doubt in my mind that content will be coming out at a regular pace, even after Antorus, all the way to the end of expansion. Because they know they've lost too much credibility. And they know they will never get that credit. It doesn't matter what they say, they will never get it back until they've proven it. So they have to have a good end to it. You know, otherwise it's a bit like a football team leading 1-0 all the way till the last 5 minutes and then suddenly letting 2 goals in and losing the game. That, you know, no one will care that they were winning for so long if they cock it up at the end. They basically sacrificed WoD to make Legion. Yes, they did. I mean, that's the thing to bear in mind. Well, the other thing to bear in mind is Legion has probably been in the building longer than any other expansion because they were doing Legion. When they started WoD, they also started Legion. They did them both in parallel. They talked a lot about that. And so there was always going to be more time spent on Legion come what may, as soon as they decided that was going to be the second expansion out of the two. But yeah, you're right. There came a point in WoD at which they thought, do you know what? We've made a right pig's breakfast of this. Let's just drop it completely and work on Legion. Personally, I'm fine with content drought. That's because I expect to be, well, I hope to be in the alpha stroke beta. It might be quite ironic because I might not be. Like every expansion where I've been playing and wanted to, I've actually managed to get into the beta fairly early on, purely by luck. Whereas this time round, when you've got a channel, obviously you want to be in there so that you can do your content. Now the irony is I'm not big enough to get in by right, so it'll still be down to luck. This time I might not actually get in. So at that point I wouldn't be very happy at all. Have I heard of a website called WoW Analyzer? Yes, I have. Yes, WoW Analyzer I've used it a few times, yeah. It loses. I mean, you can do it in Warcraft logs itself, some of the things, but WoW Analyzer it's a what would I call it? I would call it sort of what Raid Bots is to Simcraft, I suppose. It's a nice little user interface for it. But yeah, people do use that, yeah. I've actually just realised I need to go back to my list of things, of videos that I was going to do at the start of the summer and I never got round to. No ret info. We're not going to get any ret info. What ret info are you expecting? We've had it all already. The class changes have been announced. I mean, there's nothing, you know, there's nothing to say there won't be changes announced after it goes live or something like that. Like, you know, Blizzard have already made it clear they will make changes to classes when they feel like it. Oh, WoW Analyzer, okay. I mostly use it for things that are not me, because I can see from Warcraft logs stuff to do with me. I tend to use it for things that I'm not familiar with when checking out, for example, prospective trials. So let's have a look. Yeah, well, that's going back to Shadow Fiend's comment about don't want to play WoW all year round, and there are a lot of people like that. That's something that obviously is a bit of a problem for Blizzard's revenue system, really. The fact that it's a subscription-based model in a world where people don't really like paying subscriptions. And I don't know whether they will ever change that. Well, the thing is, Rhett had one of the most development times of any of the specs. It was one of, like, when Open Alpha first came out, there were only a few specs you could play. And Rhett was one of them. It was one of the first, because it was the one they were going to be making the most changes to, that and a few others. It was one of the first ones to be brought out for testing. So they made a lot of those changes during the alpha and beta process. Even though there were some stunning own goals they scored that we shouted them about for ages, but they didn't listen. And on some of them, they're still not listening, but there you go. Can't help that. But I will be doing, obviously, another live Rhett Q&A to discuss all these things. But when 7.3 has gone out, I'm not going to do it before then. When they up the amount of employees working on WoW after Siege, they set all of those working region and now take... Blah, blah, blah. Well, I know one thing. I'm trying to remember exactly what was said. There was a comment said about, when you can understand it, if you're in like a studio, doesn't matter what sort of you're developing, whether it's game or anything else, and you suddenly get an influx of new people to work with you, coordinating them with if they didn't change the management structure at all, would not have been straightforward. And if they did change the management structure, that wouldn't have worked immediately either, because people would have to get used to it. So massively, it's one thing to say, you've massively increased the number of people working on a thing, but that creates coordination problems. Are my WeCorers available? I sort of. Hold on, let me just check something. There's a bit of a project which I intended to have much further on now, and I haven't, if I'm honest. But let me just see. I have got some things somewhere. Not WeCorers as such, although they could be added at some point. Good afternoon, Epic. But some people, when some people talk about my WeCorers, what they actually mean are my tell me whens, because that's what I actually have. But let's just see. God's sake. Right, I need to change this. Basically, yes and no. If you go to thetegaming.net, I created a website. There's not much on it. There's almost nothing on it. But I have got this at least. And then what you have to do is you have to go to WoW, World of Warcraft, and then WoW Guides, which is the only clickable link at the moment. And then there's WeCorers and Profiles. Unfortunately, WeCorers and Profiles is a gallery, and I didn't intend it to be a gallery. So it opens up a gallery, but there's a thing there that says go to link. And I have links to oh, I do have some links to some WeCorers. Hold on. It's not working at the moment, or is it? I don't have everything there. Oh, the rotational one. Sorry, I'm looking at that and I wasn't paying attention here. Yes, use Hakili. Like at the start of the expansion, when Hakili wasn't updated for Legion, I was using Tell Me When myself. But the problem with that is you end up with several, like 7 icons across. to do the job of what Hakili can do in 3 icons, so it saves space. So that's loads better. At the same time, you should track things as well, like judgment debuffs on targets and stacks of Crusade and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that does. But the website is like a low priority thing, really. The main reason for it, ironically, is people asking questions just like that. But I haven't even finished that little bit on it. I'm not going to answer loads of ret ones, by the way, because we don't have, you know, not everyone here is a ret. But this might be a general one for classes in thing. So, no, the relics for ret... Right, so the way the traits work with the Netherlight Crucible is the extra trait you get via the 3rd row is never going to be the same trait as the relic has by default. You never get a double trait. So if you have a relic with your BIS trait on it, you have 0 chance to get that same trait again on the 3rd row. So the best you can hope for is the 2nd BIS trait. But what the idea of this is that if you have a relic with your most worthless trait, it might still be a useful relic because maybe the BIS trait is on that 3rd row, and also maybe there's something good to choose on the 2nd row as well, which means that that relic could actually still be the best one you have to slot. So it means, hi Guios. It might mean that even what would look like a really bad relic now may not be. But I mean, the Netherlight Crucible is not. It's not going to come out straight away. Of course, when patch 7.3 does come out, there's going to be 2 weeks without it, and then it comes out in the 3rd week, and then to even access any of the extra traits, you're going to have to be at least artifact level 69. What role, if any, do I see Sylvanas and Jaina in the next expansion? Sylvanas is War Chief, so you would think, unless that changes, and the thing is, if that does change at the end of this expansion, then I don't know what the Horde's playing at. They're going through CEOs like there's no tomorrow. There's not many people left. But Jaina, now, the situation at the moment, in theory, with Jaina is they don't necessarily have to be actively thinking of a storyline for her. However, Blizzard did tweet a couple of weeks ago some artwork on Jaina saying that that was for Gamescom, which suggests to me that unless it's for Hearthstone or something, that maybe she is getting a story and that they are playing on something. And it may be that that story isn't even for the next expansion. It may be that whatever content is coming out after Antorus involves Jaina coming back. And no, I don't think she's going to be a Dreadlord, because that wouldn't make any sense anymore. Not that it ever did. Well, I suppose it could have been. I mean, she could have been a Dreadlord in disguise, but I don't think she was. Should you create your own rotation for Hakili? No. Hakili uses the APL from Simcraft. You could do some things in the... like, one thing Hakili does, which is really annoying, is it puts Spectre of Betrayer in there. It doesn't put other trinkets in for somehow, on-use trinkets, but it does Spectre of Betrayal, which I don't like at all. I usually just ignore it, but in actual fact, what I should probably do is go through and delete that. You can also change some options, like sometimes it'll suggest interrupting. You can get rid of that. You don't want that, because you don't always want it to. You don't always want to interrupt just because you can. No, Hakili should be fine in terms of general rotational stuff. It should be fine, but you don't follow it blindly. You always need to. That's why you need to track a few other things. Oh, is it BlizzCon key art? Well, it could or could not be. It could still be even at BlizzCon for the post Antorus stuff. She might be coming back to us, because here's the thing, like, the way I see it, after Antorus, there has to be some more content. Yes, I think there would be a shall we say medium raid, if they don't want to use the words big or small. Medium then. Trial of Valor type stuff. But other than that, it's just as someone else said, like scenarios and things like that. Like, they're not going to get raiders bogged down in more raid content when they need us to be testing the new expansion. So what are people going to get excited about? People are not going to get excited about more scenarios or more quests or any other type of casual content. Unless, of course, there was a major storyline attached to it. And Jaina coming back would be a major storyline. So, you know, although she may still have a large part to play in the expansion, you know, I wouldn't mind thinking that maybe she's intended for the latter part of Legion itself. Well, no, because you shouldn't. Blade of Wrath or Blade of Justice in general is a super high priority. Super high priority. You don't want to use Judgment before Blade of Wrath. I don't know why you would do that. You know, if you're going to use Judgment before something, it's a spender. Because although Judgment... I mean, it changed with Tier 21 when Judgment does stupid amounts of damage. But Blade of Justice now does so much damage. It's sometimes even worth overcapping just to use it. Did you miss anything fun? We were just discussing 7.3 mostly, as you might expect, and the new expansion. And how we're not going to find out anything about it. So we can still speculate for a few more. Or a couple more months, shall we say. But yeah, anyway, so I'm not going to talk loads about Ret, as I say, because you know everyone here is Ret spect. Should we just go back to there to see if there... there was a cracking one when I was looking through. It's still there now. There was a post, which I actually don't know what it's about. It was for feedback on the PTR. And it said feedback, and it meant to say Forbidden Descent, but I don't know what Forbidden Descent is. It's not an encounter in Antorus as far as I can tell, so it's a weird one. Unless it's the Raid Finder. I think it might be the Raid Finder one. But they misspelt it, and they put Decent instead of Descent. They've changed it now, though. But I'm not sure when I'm going to see updates for Gamescom now. That's the issue. But anyway. So yeah, so that's what we'll talk. I'll put it back up again just really briefly. Where is it? Ah, it's there. So basically Trade Trap Hansa from Wowhead has interviewed Ian Hazakostas. He hasn't really said anything of consequence other than, you know, by saying that Antorus is the final big raid of Legion and that there's not going to be a small Ruby Sanctum type raid. Well, that is a one boss raid, but won't directly say it's the final raid full stop. That is either Hazakostas is a big tease, or we are going to get another raid after Antorus, but it's going to be a few bosses, Trial of Valor type thing. The interesting thing for me will not be that the fact there's going to be a new one, but how difficult it will be. Because there's no point in making it Trial of Valor type difficult either, I wouldn't have thought. Because by the time it comes out, we'll be into full swing alpha and beta. Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking. Like, you know, if I was to guess what it's going to be about, I would think something that leads into the next expansion. And it could be based around something that Jaina has been... Because when they do reintroduce Jaina at some point, whenever it is, and there is, you know, there is now that tease from Blizzard that it's likely to be related to the next expansion, we're going to have to be finding out what she's been up to. Because she's been sulking for quite a long time. And when she buggered off, like at the start of Legion, there has to be something. She must have been up to something. She hasn't just been sitting in a rocking chair stroking cats all this time. She must have been up to something. And so I think it might be related to that and links in with the new expansion. That was what I would be hoping for anyway. Yeah, well, Jaina is a really weird one in terms of her storyline, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because, you know, she was so pro-Horde, or pro-peace between Horde and Alliance, that she even allowed Thrall to kill her own dad. You know, because her dad was in the wrong, she was okay with that. And yet all of a sudden, Garrosh orders the destruction of her Theramore Isle. And yeah, sure, her friends get killed in it, but everyone knows it was Garrosh that did this. And she just suddenly goes mad on the Horde. And I know also it's related to that theft of that bell thing from Dalaran as well. But even that's fairly obvious it was Garrosh behind it. So she's completely changed her outlook on things in a way that, to my mind, wasn't adequately explained. Yes, well, that's what I'm thinking, Action Man, that she has been off. She's off doing something. It's going to be Old Gods stroke Naga related. And then she'll come back. It will lead into a new raid. Where that raid will be, I don't know. I don't think they'll... Well, would they make a new zone for it? They've made so many new zones. We've effectively had... Because my main gripe at the start of Legion, when we were doing Alpha and Beta, was there's not many zones in this expansion, because you basically had 4 zones to level in, which to my mind wasn't very many, although in the end it was fine. Then you had your 5th Suramar for level cap only. Then you had the Broken Shore, which you could get to, but it was unpopulated before 7.2. And now we've got 3 more on Argus, but they're quite small. They're very Broken Shore type. You know, they're not zones of the size or complexity of the Broken Isles zones. They're more like Broken Shore type zones. So I suppose we could get another small zone that it's to do with. Where that zone would be is of more interest than what the content would be. Hoping to get more lore about Medivh in the next expansion. I really don't see why we would, if I'm honest. Although Medivh could, in theory, have... Because his mother was alive for so long, that in the libraries of Karazhan there might be information on all sorts of things. They were primarily concerned with fighting the Legion and demons. Not really to do with... They don't really get involved in Old Gods in any serious way. So I don't see how Medivh would have any further place in World of Warcraft after this expansion. But it's not impossible. But at the same time, I certainly hope they don't keep doing the old Jaina comes back, but she'll only help the Alliance, and the Horde can piss off and all that. That's got to stop at some point, because that's just silly. Do I think Bolvar will be involved in the next expansion? He might be. The only thing that makes me think maybe not is Blizzard did talk about some regret about doing all this class-specific stuff, all these class order halls and the artifact stuff like that, because as they said, especially with the class-specific stuff, the order halls, that for every quest they made for that, they basically had to make 12 of them, or another way of looking at it, each of those quests was only for 1/12 of the population of the game, not counting outs, because it's for only one class got it. So I think because there's been a lot of class-specific stuff in Legion, and although I don't think it's turned them off doing class quests in theory, they're certainly not going to do as many. And Bolvar is very much... I don't think they're going to base an expansion or even a patch around him. They would only do it, I think, for Death Knights, really. So... Are there any big palette changes for things I've already covered? No. I mean, I will do a companion guide as soon as the patch comes out, and it's, well, let's say within the first week. Rathian, yes, is an interesting one who could certainly be brought back. He's the sort of person that can be brought back at any time, can't he? Anytime anything's to do with Azeroth, he can come back. He was in Legion in a significant way, although not a way that made any sense in the alpha, because Ebonhorn in alpha, when you did that quest, turned out not just to be some black drake, but turned out to be Rathian himself. Except that never made any sense. So they changed that. But yeah, he could be brought back at any time they choose. Whether they'll choose to do that. I mean, that's why I did that video on who's going to be our next guide. Because it's going to get a bit silly if it's Khadgar again. Because then players that have only been playing for the last few years might just sort of think that Khadgar is our guide in the game, which is not supposed to be. So he needs to take a bit of a back seat. It needs to be someone else's turn. But yeah, so I would expect not nearly as much. Because you'll notice there's not been any real class quest chains anymore in Legion. Because they've already decided that it's taking too much time. Because every time they do, well, they've got to do 12 of them. So what seemed to be a good idea to them at the start has turned out not to be that good idea after all. So we're not going to get loads of that in the future. I think he was, I don't know. Like it was obvious for him to be involved in Walls of Draenor because he was very much involved with the knocking out of the Dark Portal twice in Warcraft 2. Do I mean Warcraft 2? I'm sure I mean Warcraft 2. Certainly in the Warcraft RTSs. It also, yes, as you say, made some sense with Legion because he's the heir apparent of Medivh. And although not the Guardian, he's got the Guardian staff. But there's nothing special with Anduin in 7.3. I think nothing that we've seen. But that was a surprise to me. The thing is, although all the dialogue has been data mined, and in actual fact, now that we're not going to find out about the expansion, that video that I was holding on to with some speculation in it, including some spoilers of 7.3, I'm going to bring out probably tomorrow. There's no point in holding on to it now. But yeah, it was a big surprise to me that there was no dialogue of Anduin, and you can't really see him in the PTRs. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the raid. But we can't ignore the fact that it's possible he's involved in one of the cinematics. But I would think it unlikely. Because he doesn't crop up in any of the stuff I've done on PTR. And he doesn't crop up in any of the data mined dialogue. So I don't think so. But that doesn't mean to say they can't... But that's strange. That is really strange. Because Velen has that prophecy where Anduin is leading an army of the light. But that could... I suppose that could... We assume that was to do with the Legion. Maybe that's going to be retcons. That's to do with the Void instead. I don't know. Sourfang. It's the thing that surprises me is that like Sylvanas has got no real business being war chief. It's not. There's not going to be. I would be thinking if I was Blizzard, I would be wanting to steer it back to an Orc war chief. But to do that, they've got to have an Orc being prominent in the storyline again, don't they? So that people who haven't played, who've maybe only just started playing the game the last couple of years, know who this guy is. Sourfang would be one candidate for that, but they've got to big him up again, and they've made no attempt as far as I can tell. I mean, I played Horde at the start of Legion and through the alpha and beta. I've seen no serious attempt at them bigging him up. Actually, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but you're not correct. I shall say no more. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't mean to say that demons disappear, because demons are not the Burning Legion. Like they are at the moment, because Sargeras has controlled them all. But there were demons before the Burning Legion, and there will be demons after the Burning Legion. Oh my god, has the sound gone again? What? Just make it Thrall again. He's a pathetic figure now. You know, he's lost his Doomhammer. It turns out that whatever random shaman picked it up within half a minute already knew about it better than he was. Yeah, demons will still be about. They don't disappear. Like the undead would still be about no matter what they did to end the Lich King, because they were undead about before the Scourge. The Scourge just happens to be one type of undead. The Wheel of War Chiefs again. Well, I don't think they can do it anytime now, because in terms of there's no real... I would say it takes at least one expansion run up to big up a new War Chief. And I can't see that they're doing that. So I certainly don't think there'll be a new War Chief in the next expansion. But I also can't see how... I can't see how they even allowed Sylvanas to become the War Chief. That was a shocking cock-up. Made no sense at all. Gammon. I can't see him winning a Matgarat against Sylvanas, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm still very, very curious to see what's going to happen with the family entanglements with Sylvanas, because I've seen, and this isn't a spoiler, because although it's in Argus thing, it's a fairly obvious thing to behold. Like, Illyria went through the Dark Portal. By the time we reopened the Dark Portal in Burning Crusade, she'd gone with Turalyon. And so Illyria, at this point, has no idea what happened in Warcraft 3 or any storylines in World of Warcraft up to the present time. Which means Illyria has no idea that Sylvanas is 1, Horde Warchief, and 2, an undead Banshee. Now, I've seen the thing on Argus where her other sister, whose name I keep forgetting, is it Verisa, tells her that she's Horde Warchief, but does not tell her the other bit. So, and I haven't seen any data mine dialogue of her telling her the other bit either. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. The Warchief should be some random peon. I really don't think that would work. Have I heard the audio warning in beta from both Horde and Ally when entering raid? I haven't entered a raid, so no. Does that include LFR? Should I go into an LFR at some point just to see what it's like? Yes, there's any number of what would really be considered minor lore characters but attached to major lore characters that could make a return in the game at some point. Kalia could be one. At the same time, I don't really know how she would have any bearing on old gods type stuff. What makes a difference to an ordinary undead? I think it's just that's what happens to elves. Like when you look in Diamol, for example, the undead elves, like they're banshees, aren't they? The female ones, of course. I think it's just... I think there's a difference. Like, I know, obviously, we have, like, Night Elf and Blood Elf Death Knights, and they just, look like they are. But that's just, I think, gameplay. But in lore terms, I think there's a difference between elves and, like, other races, because the elves are immortal. So when you make them undead, I think it just does something different to them. But not necessarily everything they've done makes a lot of sense. Oh, they can wreck. We already know they'll retcon anything at the drop of a hat. Sometimes they'll admit it, sometimes they won't. mean, I don't even know where Kalia would be at this point, thinking about it, because I really don't know where she'd even be. But there's so much about Sylvanas that you only get really from the books. Like, no one who's just played the game would have the slightest clue why she was so keen to get some Valkyr from what's her name, with that cinematic with the lantern from Helya. You only get that from reading the novel that takes place just after the fall of the Lich King. Unless, of course, it's covered. I suppose it's possible. I say that. That's yeah, thank you. Yeah, it might. Maybe it's Horde players would know. Maybe it was covered in some of the Horde quest lines in Cataclysm, because I didn't level up a Horde through Cataclysm. So I suppose if it was covered, then maybe. And I wasn't playing at the time, and I didn't level up a Horde character through those things. Well, sometimes they pick the story up on one path and drop it on a path 100 miles away. That's the thing. They don't think about it in the long term. Which is fair enough in a way, because if they have a good idea, it seems... But, you know, just sometimes it just... That's what I was saying about the books, though, because there's a lot of novels that enrich the lore of World of Warcraft. But there's quite a few of them now. If you read them, if you were to come in new and read them, you'd have to be told, oh, by the way, all that stuff you've read has been retconned now. It's no longer the case. Or maybe some of it is the case and some of it isn't. So that's why the only if you want to find out about the lore, I wouldn't even read the novels anymore. I would just read the chronicles. Yeah, but that doesn't explain about Sylvanas herself, because the Valkyr aren't just there to allow her to raise more, which is what is explained in the forest. It's the fact that she killed herself until Chronicles get retconned. Yeah. So I mean, the idea is now Sylvanas tried to kill herself, and sort of succeeded in a way. But then the Valkyr who were freed from the Lich King said, oh, you should, you know, carry on leading, because bad things will happen if you don't. And so to bring her back, one of those 9 Valkyrs took her place in Hell, basically, in the Warcraft version of Hell. And so every time she dies, one of those Valkyr has to take her place. So she's like a cat with 9 lives. They're running out. So that's what she needs more for. Because she now sort of regrets doing that, I think. Let's assume the Horde and Alliance dealt with everything. With the Burning Legion, all goes, would there still be a conflict between both factions? I don't even understand why there's still a conflict now. It makes no sense. Because they both have the only land... Let's think about it. What land has changed hands in the whole of World of Warcraft? South Shore, isn't it? So South Shore used to be Alliance. There were some nice quests there, actually. I was disappointed when that changed. But that used to be Alliance and it's now Horde. Has there been any other change of hands of territory in all this time? I can't think of any. And if there hasn't, then that makes it a bit silly that there's still a conflict now. Because you would just think you could just... Hi, Picketag, I'm fine, thank you. You could just keep the borders as they are now. The Horde and the Alliance have their own lands. Neither one needs more than they've already got. They keep banding together anyway to fight for common enemies. So quite why they can't just make peace with each other is beyond baffling. Beyond baffling. Some of the barons. Has it? What bit of the barons? I didn't know any of that was in Alliance hands. But I'm not an expert on the barons. Yeah, but I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense for me for the Horde Alliance. And so the only thing, the reason why it keeps going back to it is because it's called World of Warcraft. You know, and the whole premise of Warcraft was orcs versus humans initially, and then Alliance versus Horde. So they obviously feel that's a core part of it, and they're probably right. So they have to do it, but it has long ago ceased to make any sense. I can't even seriously think of any leaders of the Alliance who have any major reason to hate any other members of the Horde. Tyranda's the one with the biggest grudges, I suppose. But she's always whining anyway. Greymane just hates Sylvanas. I don't think he hates the Horde. He just hates Sylvanas. Possibly all the Forsaken. Yes, you know, so he's not very happy with Sylvanas. So you can argue that while Sylvanas is leader of the Horde, he's not very happy with the Horde either. But I don't think he has any major gripes with orcs, trolls, tauren, or goblins, or blood elves. I don't think Jaina would mana bomb or Grimmar. You wouldn't even need to. It's just huts made out of skins anyway. You just have to throw some fireworks into it. Did she? I didn't know she turned his son undead. Oh, I didn't know that. That wouldn't... Hang on, that wouldn't make any sense though, would it? Are you sure she turned his son undead? Because the whole point of the Forsaken is they've got their own will. And he's not going to join the Forsaken. Because he wouldn't join the Forsaken. He'd be like that one who goes mad, wouldn't he? I've forgotten her name now. You do it when you start off as undead now, and you show her that mirror, and she ends up being that NPC in Scarlet Monastery and stuff. Can't remember her name. She doesn't join the Forsaken. She's having none of it. Yeah, I thought that. It wouldn't make any sense because he although he would be undead, he wouldn't be Forsaken. He wouldn't join her. Yeah, I thought that. I was doing that just today actually. I thought to myself, I've been on the Maelstrom again for like quite a few months, and I just suddenly thought to myself, you know, I was looking at some of my characters thinking, bloody hell, my banks are getting full here. And a lot of it's with old reagents, and I'm a terrible hoarder. No pun intended. And I thought, what I need is a bank out. And I thought to myself, I usually make a bank out when I go to a new realm. And I haven't made one on the Maelstrom. So I made one. Unfortunately, to make the best bank out, you need a Worgen. And it takes ages to go through all the Worgen quests before you can go to Stormwind. It's a ridiculous amount of time. I was level 16 before I could go to Stormwind. With any other race, I could be a banker. I could go there to Stormwind really quickly. How many characters did I transfer? I can't remember. Some of them were already Alliance, but on Sylvanas, because I never took them to the Horde realm. I know obviously the Paladin. My Death Knight and my Hunter definitely would have been transferred, because those were characters I played a bit before. I think the others might have just been Alliance anyway. Worgen make the best bank outs because you need a bank out to look smart. So the bank out, you need to put them in a tuxedo, obviously. And they should also have a top hat. Now, it sometimes is possible to get a top hat. Oh yes, the top hat is essential. But you get it for free and guaranteed from a quest by making it Worgen. Yeah, bank outs have to look smart. What would you think of a bank if you went to a bank and the tellers were not dressed smartly? You have to think about these things. Their sole purpose in life is to look after my equipment. How can I have any confidence they're going to look after it and keep it secure if they can't even dress the part? It's either a top hat or a monocle. And the top hat is relatively straightforward to get. It just means you have to spend about 2 hours getting a Worgen through the quests. No, for some reason you can't just transmog it. It's annoying that. You should be able to, because I have other Worgen characters, but you can't. I won't be able to click on that, I don't think. Whatever it is. I don't think I should anyway, because it'll just make weird sounds for everyone else. No, can't click on that. I can see it on the chat, but I can't click on the chat because that's not interactive. And it's not appearing in my Twitch one either. So, sorry about that. Have I heard of the leaked ending of Legion? I've heard of the leaked start of the next expansion. It may also be that transmog only covers green or better items as well, yes. So I don't necessarily which leaked version you mean. I've seen a leaked copy of the next expansion just before Legion came out. I don't know whether that's what you mean or not. Our artifacts are being drained. We are going to drain our artifacts to do a thing. Some great threat is going to appear, and we are going to, and I forget the details of it, but we're going to have to use our artifacts like we've done through Legion. There's been lots of quests in Legion where we use our artifacts to do a thing, only this time it's going to mean draining them of all their power. But that's for the start of the next expansion. So I don't know about breaking as such, but it becomes bereft of all its power. It'll probably just become a weapon at that item level, because obviously we need a weapon, and there's no weapons in Legion, or not many. There is a monocle indeed, but it's very expensive because it's very rare. I don't think you can do a quest to obtain it. So, and it's not even always in the auction house, and when it is, it's a lot of money. And top hats are better, really, because they're more striking. You know, the problem with... hold on, what's this? Oh, I don't know what that is. The problem with monocles, they look very smart, very stylish, but you can't always see them clearly. As far as I know, weapons in the next expansion are just weapons again. Straightforward weapons. Yes, I know. Oh, yeah. Don't expect Blizzard to think about the consequences of what they're going to do with these artifacts. I perfectly well understand that you've got this crystalline form of a Naru in it. Yeah. But it's just going to be drained of its power. It's not going to become a corrupted Ashbringer again or anything like that. It's just, yeah. But yeah, I don't expect them to be a separate storyline. Did I see their video on speculating that we might make our own legendary weapons? Yes, I have seen their video, yeah. I don't think that's the case, though. Anything's possible. But I don't think that's the case. Because I think they're going with the legendary system from this thing in a refined state. I don't think they're going to keep it exactly the same. But the general way... Because this is, again, it comes back to this statement that Ian has made just today. No, wrong one. That when they were talking about legendaries again, about the issues, about the drop rates too stingy at the start. Why even talk about that if not for your suggested improvements for the next expansion? Why even mention it? So I am utterly convinced that the essentials of the legendary system will be the same. It's just that they're going to reduce the impact of those throughput legendaries, which is what they said were the issues a long time ago. Do I prefer normal weapons, which you get like it, or I quite liked the artifact weapons in many ways. I wished that we could have just kept those. I liked that system. Yeah, I like the artifacts. I would rework it, of course, but the concept of the artifact weapon I quite like, and I wish it was just the thing now that is our weapon. But no, they decided that fairly early on. That's not going to be the case. I don't know. I mean, weapons. I don't know that weapons were always that big a deal. Obviously, you know, sometimes you get an issue where, depending on which bosses drop weapons, the problem with weapons is going to be, if they're just normal weapons, is Titan forging. That's the biggest issue there's going to be in the new expansion, if it's just normal weapons again. Because, like, for example, when I got my tier 20 gloves, and I right-clicks the token, it was 950 pair of gloves. Wow, fantastic. And a few other people have got 950 or 955 items as well, and you think, oh, you lucky bugger. But if it's a normal piece of equipment, people just say that. It's literally that. It's like, fine. If it's a trinket, then people salivate a little bit more. Can you imagine what's going to happen if if a weapon drops in the next expansion and it Titan forges all the way up? That could cause some arguments. Titan forging weapons would be an extremely toxic form of Titan forge, yes. So, coming back to what you were saying about Avatar and so on, about making our own weapons, that would be a good solution. It's just, I don't think it's the solution Blizzard are thinking of. Because Blizzard don't see the problem with Titan forging. From their point of view, it only pisses off a few thousand people. That's what they've got in their head. They don't really think it's a widespread problem. I wish they would get rid of the legendary system, but they can't. To be fair to them, they can't. Hi, Lord Black. Legendaries have been in the game since day dot. And they have to have a legendary system. And until they can think of a better... And I agree that the ones that came before it, although I prefer the Mop and Wad one, I don't mind that legendary system. But obviously, they've decided that it's not for the long term. You were hoping to get weapons that you need to fill with relaxing traits. Well, I would quite like that as well, Jack. But I mean, we have to wait and see until they announce anything definitively. But I mean, my great fear at the moment is Titan Forge weapons. I just think that would be awful. Absolutely awful. Well, Ellipsis, what would you replace it with? What system would you use for legendaries then? I don't think every single legendary system was better than this one at all. The original legendary systems were not at all better than this. Because as bad as you might think Titan Forge weapons would be, the original legendary system was far worse. That was you giving someone in your raid a super powerful weapon with no prospect of anyone else in that raid getting it. I mean, sometimes you did, sometimes you got lucky. Like I was in the guild on Illidan, where we must have had one of the world's most productive trains of Warblades coming out. We were giving our Warblades to people who didn't even want them. We were giving them to warrior tanks. And they were, you know, these tanks were basically going, I don't want it, I'm not going to use it. And they were being given them anyway. It's like, we can't disenchant it, have the bloody thing. You know, all our rogues had them, all our DPS warriors had them. And we had several warriors and DPS rogues. So, the vanilla, it's not just, it's vanilla and TBC system was not good. The Wrath system is still divisive because even though, because that was very much like, that was actually started in vanilla because in Anchorage it was the same sort of thing. You gather so much of a thing and do a quest chain to get your legendary weapon. Now at that point you've got, but you've still got to decide who gets the first one because it's going to be a long time. Well, it's going to be a long time before the first person gets it, but it's going to be a long time before the second person gets it, and then the third person, and so on. So you still have a situation where only a few people in your raid get it. And then what happens, if you give it to someone, they complete it, and then they bugger off to another guild. Because do you know what? They're one of this small number of people in the world who have a legendary. That makes them more marketable. So, no, the original... The only legendary system that could possibly, and even then it's subjective, be better than the current one is the Mop Wad one. The other ones, we already have Titan Fortune weapons, don't we? Well, relics, yes, we do. But with relics, you have to get 3, don't you? Because each relic is only like, you know, if you get 1 that's Titan Forged all the way up, it's nice, but there's like 1 out of 3. You think they've ruined the orange letters? Well, of course they have. They've ruined the purple letters even more, though. But the problem is that in a game now where raiding is much more competitive than it used to be, you can't allow 1 or 2 people to have this godlike weapon where everyone else just doesn't. It's not feasible. Well, that's another thing, Jack. Calling it legendary now when we have so many of them is now farcical, yes. The Mop Wad Legos, that was where you did it as a quest chain. So you didn't actually have a legendary really at all. It sort of grew over time. Like it was a ring in Wad and it was a cloak in Mop. Although you didn't even get the cloak to begin with. They did all sorts of weird things with like a legendary gem and stuff like that. But the fact is, you know, the key point of it is it was a quest chain that spanned the whole expansion and that everyone could keep up to date with. You know, main raiders, like organised raiders, would be slightly ahead of LFR raiders purely by dint of the fact that LFR came out a bit later, but it had the same chance to drop on LFR as any other mode. Well, legendary really should be a hugely rare artifact. And like you can excuse the fact that everyone has one. You could still, I think, call it legendary in like Mop and Wad, even though every player had them. Because in the World of Warcraft, we're not supposed to have all these players. You're supposed to be one of a small band of people. So that's sort of okay. But the fact that a single player has, God, how many have we got now? Over a dozen of these legendary items. It doesn't seem very likely to me. But Dragon Wrath didn't work well because you had people that would do. You had a lot of envy. You know how people are now. Like you can have people complain if one person gets a favourable assignment on a fight over another because one person's not going to get as good ranks. Now you put legendaries into the mix when everyone's so DPS horny. Or you know, healing rank even, and it goes mad. So you're giving it that person, and then you still have the problem because you can only equip one person at a time, and it takes quite a while to do it. You create a situation where someone might leave your guild because all of a sudden they can join someone 200 ranks higher because they've got this legendary. And it's the choosing by your guild. Like, I wouldn't want that job. I wouldn't want to decide who gets it. Horrendously divisive. And you could give it to the wrong person, like I say. With the artifact traits, I think some of them will be baked into our baseline. They can't They can't do another major change of the way classes and specs work, because Legion was their big reset on classes and specs. So they're not going to do another one. So I think the special abilities that you get on the artifact will just be made baseline. Some of the others maybe as well. I mean, most of them are just like percentage increases on different abilities, so it doesn't even matter about those because they'll just rebalance for the new expansion. But the ones that have become part of the new playstyle, I'm not saying all of them would be retained. Like, for example, subtlety rogues not taking fall damage, that might leave. That, you know, it might be baseline, it might not. But I do think the extra abilities will be. I think the extra abilities will, because they would have to redesign all the specs if they didn't. And I don't think they want to do that. Yeah, but you say higher ranks longer time. You know, it's not a theoretical thing. People in guilds at the time had people who were getting those weapons and leaving that guild. I'm not saying everyone did, obviously, not everyone did. But it was a common feature. It's just all there was to it. You can't always predict who's going to leave a guild and for what reason. So I haven't been paying too much attention to that stuff. But do we know what we're going to be getting next expansion to replace the weapons? We don't know for certain. It's not going to be different artifact weapons, no. No. It'll just be weapons, I strongly suspect. I would have liked artifact weapons to have remained, but they're not going to. World quests do get on your nerves after a while, don't they? I mean, they're quite a good idea in theory. The thing I don't mind about them is the fact that you don't absolutely have to do them. We probably will again as soon as artifact knowledge kicks off again, because they're a decent source of artifact power. Hi, Fishko. But the problem is, I mean, you know, people will get bored of content. I think a lot of people these days, as I say, want to, and I'm probably no different, you know, they just want to play several games. They want to move from one game to another. But Blizzard want us playing the game every day. It doesn't quite work that way. So we're sort of at odds with what they want. That's why you have like daily content. You have daily content in everything though. Like the other games I play, like I don't log on to Elder Scrolls Online every day. The fact that I don't means I miss out on a load of reagents that I get mailed every day. But I only get them if I log on. The mail is only sent to me if I log on. Even Lord of the Rings Online, you've got daily stuff, daily freebies if you log on. I much prefer World Quest to dailies. Dailies I hated with a passion. In fact, in MOP, as soon as I'd got all the rep I needed from them, I point blank refused to do them. I refused. Even when it took me, I actually used to do pet battles on rats in Stormwind, which took me a lot longer to get my Charms of Lesser Fortune or whatever they were called. I rather did that than dailies, even though it would have been quicker to do dailies. I was that stubborn because I hated dailies so much. Yeah, that's the thing, Jack, with artifact knowledge, like 47, 48, that sort of thing, after a couple of months. But then the problem is the exponential nature of artifacts level means that by the time, remember, we need to get to artifact level 75 to fully unlock all our relics. By the time you're getting even close to that, 567 million will be nothing. You know, 1 billion artifact power will be nothing. Be worthless. So even relatively, yeah, even when I was on the PTO, even relatively small amounts of AP stuff was giving me 500 million. Which is a lot at the artifact level I'm at the moment, and will not be by the time I actually get that far. Do you think we'll complete our weapons with concordance? No, it's impossible. Legion won't be out for long enough. They've deliberately designed it so it's not actually possible. You should farm well, it depends in terms of your farming strategy. Like, the sooner you start, the sooner you'll start unlocking stuff on the Netherlight Crucible. The sooner you'll become more powerful. But if, for example, you know you can only put up with a couple of weeks of solid farming of AP, and it's not something like it would burn you out to do it for more than a couple of weeks, then maybe you could argue you wait a bit. But the longer you leave it to wait, the longer you're going to stay underpowered. Because on as little as you need artifact level 60 to benefit from the first proper. I mean, the +5 item levels you get at whatever it is. You just wait for the last AK. No, that's just silly. Just do a bit. Just don't burn yourself out. And that's what I intend to do. I'll step it up a bit, but I will intend to not burn myself out. Unfortunately, it's going to be happening when I go back to work. It's all coinciding when I go back to work. I'm not very happy with Blizzard about this. And there you go. Yeah, so if you're 62, well, when you're 63, you'll get another unlock. So, you know, you will want to get that 63. And then when you're 63, you'll want to get to 66 and so on. Every 3 levels, you're going to get an appreciable increase in power. I'm only 59, so let me see. I won't even be 60 by the time the patch goes live, I don't think. If it comes out next week, that is, and that's still an assumption. I don't actually know how likely that is to be true. Refuse to farm AP only. I won't have much say in the matter realistically, because I think the only people who can chill with it are those who finished Tomb of Sargeras, because if you haven't finished it, then you need more power to push yourself through it more quickly. Do we need another nerf on damage and HP next expansion? I think they may not do that. The last thing I heard them say about it was that they didn't see a problem because the numbers in reality don't get any bigger. Because all you do, like when it gets to 1,000, you just put a K after it. When it's 1,000,000, you just put an M after it. When it's 1,000,000,000, you just put, I don't know whether they put a G after it or whatever, I suppose. So I think the last thing Blizzard were talking about was maybe not. But we won't find that out until, as I say, they talk about it. There are difficulties with doing squishers. But I just think their attitude now is as long as the systems can cope with the numbers used, that all you have to do is just have a 4-digit number with a suffix on it to indicate whether it's thousands, millions, billions, trillions, whatever. I would love a level squish as well. I've already sort of said my piece several times on the whole point of levels. In an MMO, I just don't see it working long term. For G, billion equals G for Jigger. Well, apart from anything else, like I say billion, I'm only using billion because everyone understands it by that. Not every country will agree on what a billion is. Like, to an American, a billion is 1,000 million, but that's not actually traditionally what a billion is. The only reason that Americans adopted that system was as the same thing why any country adopts any system, is because of rich people. So you had this was some time ago, you had millionaires, and they thought, that's great, I'm a millionaire, fantastic. Then you had people who had lots of millions, 1,000 million in fact, and they thought it was unfair to be called a millionaire, because it's like, hang on, someone with 1 or 2 million is a millionaire. I've got 1,000 million. I'm way richer than them. I should have a special name. There should be a special name for 1,000 million. So Americans decided to call 1,000 million a billion. And then when America became the largest economy, the rest of the world just followed suit because, you know, you just have to. But yeah, a billion. Well, it's not just in Netherlands. Everywhere in the world, apart from America, A billion is technically a million, but in reality now people just use 1,000 million because that's what's happened when you become the major economy. You get to sort of dictate things like that. So yeah, but it doesn't really, but giga is technically the prefix for billion, and tera for, or 10 to the 9 if you want to think of it that way, and tera for 10 to the 12, and so on. A billion is 9 zeros for America, and a billion in the rest of the world. Like, there was a time when America didn't get its own way, because when they were building, again going back to physics, particle accelerators, and in America they developed when we were talking about particle accelerators that could generate giga electron volts, which is quite a lot of energy. Americans wanted to call, well, they did, because they can call theirs on what they like, and they called theirs the Bevatron, B for billion. But the rest of the world wasn't having it, because they said, nah, the billion's 10 to the 12, not 10 to the 9. Yeah, well, everyone, like gigabytes, for example. I mean, I know that's not a fact because bytes works differently. It's based on 1024, not 1000s. But, that you talk about gigabytes and stuff like that, or gigahertz for processing speed and stuff. So the G will still be used because even Americans use that as a general prefix for 10 to the 9 because that's just international. Is there still hope for the pre-Legion levelling? I see no sign from Blizzard that they want to spend any time whatsoever on getting in a significant number of new players. I see nothing in their marketing or anything else attracting people to the game. If they had, they would have made more of a push in the wake of the film to get people in, and I didn't really see that. There was a little bit. I'm not saying they did nothing, but they didn't do much. Well, you'll find that on Argus, things will be a little bit tougher than on the Broken Isles. That's the advantage of doing new zones. You can sort of reset the difficulty of mobs a little bit. Yeah, Retpal, it's not just Germany, it's every country. Every country outside of America. But America, because... like, if you think about when you would ever use a billion, like, or 10 to the 9, 10 to the 12, doesn't matter. The only time you would ever use that number outside of physics or chemistry or like science in general is with money. So the only time people use that large amount of, that large number is with money. And because the global currency is American dollars, and Americans call a billion 10 to the 9, then that's what it is. They've got the major economy, so they get to say what it is. But no, I did explain, Adam, why Americans wanted it to be like that. It wasn't just to be difficult. But yeah, so there was a reason for it. It wasn't a good reason, but it was a reason. So is Argus going to be like Timeless Isle with welfare gear to catch up? You could argue Broken Shore is more like that, because of the Nether Shards thing, but there is an equivalent currency on Argus as well. So you've got another currency which doesn't just come from invasions, you can also get it from chests on Argus and stuff like that. I've completely forgotten what it's called. It's like Nether Shards, but it's not. And you can get tokens for 9-10 item level there. It's not as straightforward as Timeless Isle, because on Timeless Isle you used to just go around getting chests and you got the gear straight away. You didn't have to turn in tokens. So it's going to take longer, it's going to take more farming to get these things, just like it is in the Broken Shore. The 77th day rule. Yes, it's looking increasingly likely now, isn't it? That being said, until, like, there hasn't been an official announcement, and it's still not on the background downloader. So there's nothing to say it couldn't be a week after, but I see no reason why it wouldn't be next week. But, I saw no reason why it wouldn't be this week or last week. Are you talking about Prime? Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Argonite. With the launch of 7.4, we'll be able to upgrade all your gear. Right. You can upgrade crafted gear with 935, but Argus crafted gear, not the crafted gear we've got now. So you have to get the new gear, and you have to get all the new materials for it. Doesn't use Blood of Sargeras, it uses Primordial Sargerite. Yeah, they're not going to let you, like at the moment, like Mythic Raiders at the moment have an average roundabout of 935 item levels. Some people have a bit more. They're not going to let people, just by farming the hell out of Argus for a couple of weeks, get gear that's on a par with Mythic Raiders. Or even, obviously it wouldn't be because it wouldn't have set bonuses, but you know what I mean. So there's limited amounts. But it's one of those things, I think they'd probably ease those limitations when the new raid comes out. So I think they will increase the patterns, the number of patterns, when Antorus Burning Throne comes out. But that's just my idea. Until Blizzard say something, we can't know for certain. Yes, it is only special Argus crafted gear that goes to 935. Well, the Dark Moon deck is not an Argus thing. So that's at 900. That's 900. It's saying 900. You know, or basically, when 7.3 comes out, the Broken Shore and the Broken Isles are done with. Everything's finished. There's nothing new. It's all finished with. The Burning Legion has stopped invading. As soon as you kill the Fallen Avatar, you have finished the Burning Legion's invasion. You've stopped it. Evening, Valisha. So everything on the Broken Shore is done and dusted with. Unless, of course, there's some new content related to it after Antorus. But I think they might set it somewhere else related to the next expansion. So everything new, gear-wise, even including crafting-wise, everything is going to be specific to Argus. Every upgrade you get after 7.3. Have I tried the new invasion content Argus? Yes, I did. Not much of it. But I have given it a go, yeah. I wasn't that keen, much like I'm not that keen on the invasion stuff on Broken Isles either. The sort of stuff you're more likely to do on alts when you want to get some gear on them. At the same time, the fact that the shard vendor, like for relics, it might be quite good because you're allowed to choose what type of relic you get with it. Like on the Broken Shore, you can just get a relic and it's like, you know, it's potluck what it is. Whereas with the new one, you can't choose the traits, of course, but you can choose which type of relic it is, whether it's like fire, holy, shadow, fell, whatever. No, well, the thing is, like I'm already average 936. I suppose it depends on exactly what trinkets I've equipped and stuff, but round about 936, 7 item level. So I'm not going to kill myself to get shards for an item, for a 9-10 item on the off chance it Titan forges up. Very unlikely to do that. I'm far better off spending my time farming artifact power so that I get a guaranteed increase in power off my relics. Well, yes, there is. I mean, that's the thing that baffled me most of all. Blizzard was saying with the unstable Arcana Crystal, oh, yeah, we probably over budgeted a bit. We didn't really realise. But, you know, as it's got this base item level of, what is it, 860, you're very lucky if you get it Titan forging up. It's probably fine. We'll just leave it. And then they make a new one. They make a new one for Argus. What? Elor, well, this is my concern about Argus, that people will not like it. Like, Blizzard could be shooting themselves in the foot. Like, I think for what it is, it's going to be quite good. But because, like you say there, Argus, it could have been a whole expansion of itself, and it isn't. And people might read more into what's coming than there is actually there. Ultimately, what is in the Argus, or 9.3, 7.3, getting ahead of myself. Ultimately, what it is new storylines. It's storylines, very interesting storylines, that tie up a lot of loose ends. But nonetheless, that's all it is. It isn't really anything else. You know, you're getting higher item level gear by doing the same sort of content that we've already been doing in Legion. There's nothing new about the content. We're doing invasions. You know, we've done invasions already. They're slightly different, but it's still the same basic thing. You know, we get crafted gear that can go up to 935, but it's still the same. You still have to farm Primordial Saga instead of Blood of Sargeras, but you get it in the same way. And Obliterum, and you're going to use crafted gear made with the new materials on Argus. Everything's the same. Leaks about, yeah. Obviously, they're going to be doing the rounds now. The thing is, they're interesting to speculate on. But even if some of them were reliable, anything could have changed in the meantime. So, the only leak I've read that I'm confident about is the way we get rid of our artifacts, because it's the only way, it's the only thing they can do. You know, we're not just going to turn them over and put them in a museum or anything, are we? You know, it's obvious that we're going to have these things taken away from us, and there's no one going to physically steal them from us. So the only thing that makes sense is that they have their power drained, which is what I read at the start of Legion. And I'm quite happy to believe that leak, because it's the only thing that makes sense. As a Heroic Road is working on KJ, 7.3 is going to be a big boost in power for your rating. It will be for everyone who is still progressing on it. It will be for us, because we will... Where will we be? Because the Netherlight Crucible, of course, doesn't come out. Like, there's a minimum of 3 weeks before the Netherlight Crucible comes out from now. A minimum of 3 weeks. So I would bloody well hope we're on Avatar at that point. I prefer nerfing the content with better gear, yes, by increasing the power of things. My concern is if they do both at the same time. If they buff us and nerf the content. I don't like it when they do that. Apart from anything else, it never does my guild any good, because we never manage to take advantage of these things. Argent Dawn's just gone offline. Is that because, being an RP realm, that this removal of sharding means that sometimes the realm crashes? I don't think my realm's gone down. I wouldn't be able to go to BlizzCon. And as I say, it is growing steadily, I think, my channel, but it's not growing quickly. Like, my big hope, I have to confess, my big hope when I started the channel was that by the time the... even at the time, I didn't even know Legion was going to be the expansion at the time, but the second expansion after WoD, shall we say, I was hoping that it would have grown to the point where I would automatically get into alpha. You know, as soon as it goes and you've got the likes of Preach and people like that in, I was hoping I'd be in that tranche. But it's not, so I won't be. Well, if I am, I'm just going to be, it'll be lucky of me. Now, my big fear that goes with it, because you've got to think that's going to open before the end of the year, is although I have always got into betas when I've wanted to get into them at all, relatively early, I've always been in nice and early. That's just just down to luck. My fear is this time I don't get in at all. And then it's like, okay, there goes a massive amount of content on my channel. So, yes. I'm certainly not going to be large enough by the time that happens to be on their radar. Artifact weapons should be removed in a pre-patch. No, not a pre-patch. It's got to be the intro to the new expansion. Can't be. The pre-patch is still Legion. We'd have no weapons. Could you imagine? There's people still actually trying to do raids at that point. I mean, I hope my guild's done by then, but there'll still be people doing that. Advertiser friend. Yes, well, that's what I mean. Like, should we put them up? Because I actually did prepare them in case anyone did ask about them. Because obviously, Preach, at least, I know he was tweeting earlier this week to say a load of his stuff has been demonetised. But he does use naughty language. These are the rules. The YouTube ad-friendly rules. There's quite a lot of them. So these are the things that can fall foul of it. Controversial issues and sensitive events could mean anything. Basically, it means don't talk politics. I don't think he would have been done on that one. Drugs and dangerous products or substances. Occasionally, Ghosty does pretend to smoke a fake pipe. I don't think that's an issue. Harmful or dangerous acts. I don't think they would have been done for that. Hi, Radish. Hateful content. I don't think it's particularly hateful. So I think, in fact, if I was going to fall foul of anything, it would be that if they ever watched any of my gnome videos. But I seem to have got away with that. But I think this is the one that's probably done him. Inappropriate language. Video content that contains frequent uses, because it doesn't mind the odd. I occasionally let the odd one slip out, especially when I'm streaming. But therein, again, someone asked me a while ago, why don't I stream on YouTube? Why do I use Twitch? There's a few reasons. And one of the big reasons is because when I'm streaming, especially if I'm streaming my raid, there's a reason I use push to talk. And it's so that my raid don't have to put up with all my swearing and shouting when things aren't going well. Unfortunately, that means that the people listening to my stream have to put up with all of it. So that's, and I don't want any of that on YouTube. Like if I get banned from Twitch, that's unfortunate. But I don't want to get banned from YouTube. So yeah, video that contains frequent uses of strong profanity or vulgarity throughout the video may not be eligible for advertising. Occasional use of profanity won't necessarily. So there's, you know, there's profanity and vulgarity in quite a lot of his videos, I would say. Which I don't have a big deal with personally, but obviously YouTube do. Again, it's to do with this AdGate thing. The Drama Time. Yeah, I stopped watching the Drama Time stuff a long time ago, though. It was quite good when it started. I thought it was a really good idea. And it was really entertaining. So I used to watch it. Then what happened was a few people sent in stories that had nothing to do with Warcraft and were entirely about, like, shall we say, romantic interactions. And then after a few weeks, it seemed to be a theme. And I started thinking to myself at this point, I think these are made up. It almost became like a competition. Who could come up with the most outrageous, like, sex story with some tentative link to World of Warcraft? And I don't believe them anymore. So I stopped watching them at that point because it was just like, yeah, I don't think these are a thing. Renew my TG logo. No. I like it. I know it's not very imaginative, but then I'm not a very good artist. I do have, though, obviously I got someone to make up a few things. I've commissioned the same person to make me another few items. In fact, they've just sent me an email with a mock-up of what they look like. Most of them Lord of the Rings ones, but I am getting, in line with what someone asked for, someone suggested for... Oh dear, sorry. Okay. Sorry. This voice meter banana is on strike today. I don't know what it sounds like for you, but the sound keeps going really weird. I keep having to close and open up my audio mixer. But lower carry, good luck with that. I had to do an upper carry today. That was not fun. No, I did a lower carry earlier on my rogue, my shit rogue. We did it, but that wasn't fun either. Oh yeah, actually, man, the AP grind is definitely going to be here in some fashion, absolutely. No, what was I saying? Yeah, so on Twitch, for example, like there's an emote, which is this little chappy here, the little Murloc Mercadin. But I got him to make me, still not quite ready, an Ashbringer that was suggested. So that's there. And then I've gone for a few Lord of the Rings themed ones as well for when I do my Lord of the Rings stuff. So yeah, I should be building up steadily over time a nice little collection of these sort of cartoonized icons for the channel. Hi Lord 476. But so yeah, I'm just replying back to him. So I don't know when they'll be ready for, but it looks like they're getting quite close to being completed now. Not that much. He doesn't charge that much, really. So what I've asked for at the moment is just icons. I've asked for a ring, like the one ring, because 3 of them are Lord of the Rings based. So there's the ring itself, a Mordor orc, which I could also use for Warcraft because it's got a green skin, so it's sort of, you know, could be used for either. And a ranger, again, but again, that could be like a hunter as well if I want to use it for World of Warcraft. But then for definitely World of Warcraft, I've also gone for an Ashbringer, and that basically costs £35, so it's not very much. Or will be costing me that when it's done. But yeah, the artifact power system in some form will go into the next one, because I can get rid of that now, can't I? The it does what they want. There's like several things. It's really unfortunate that what Blizzard want isn't what we want. So there isn't that meeting in the middle. But they want us to be playing a lot. Artifact system is a really good way of that. I wish it wasn't in, I have to say. I think the Mythic Plus system stands up on its own without it, I'm going to say. I think the Mythic Plus dungeons would still be good just with the... Because they have improved it over Legion. I think they've made them better. And I think they can stand on their own 2 feet without the need for artifact power. If I were to change something for the next expansion, what I would do is I wouldn't have artifact power from dungeons or raids. I would have artifact power coming from the weekly chest. I would still have the weekly cash, and I would have it, the amount coming out, based on the hardest dungeon and raid that you've done that week. So therefore, there's an incentive to do a high key Mythic Plus dungeon. And I was going to do a video on this actually. And, you know, pushing up the levels of difficulty on raids as well. So that's what I would do. So I wouldn't have... I'd still have, like, it could, you know, get artifact power from World Quest and stuff. But in terms of group PvE content, I wouldn't have it come from the content. That way you don't have to have people spamming dungeons or raids. Well, you don't spam raids anyway, but dungeons. But it's based on the hardest version of each of those you did. It doesn't have to be finishing the raid. It's like, you know, you could get a certain amount of AP for doing even LFR. That could factor into it. Or if you did some bosses on normal, that would be better. If you did all the bosses on normal, that would still... It's like, you know, normal Goroth wouldn't be worth as much AP as normal Kil'jaeden. And heroic, you know, there might be some crossover. Like maybe normal Kil'jaeden is as difficult as, say, heroic Sisters or something like that, just for the sake of argument. But, you know, you have this ladder system of difficulty, of what's considered difficult content. And for dungeons, it's easy. It's like normal mode dungeon, heroic mode dungeon, mythic, then mythic plus 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Would it encourage people to snipe the 15 plus than playing their lower level mythic? What do you mean snipe it? Do you mean pay for a boost? If so, I don't see the problem with that. Because then that also, because they're still doing the content. That's all Blizzard need of the artifact power system is for people to do the content every week. In fact, they don't even need people to do the content every week. They just need people to do content every month. I don't understand what this trying to get people to play every day thing is. Because the subscription is for a month. They only want you to subscribe. But obviously someone playing once a month isn't going to subscribe. So, but you know, I can see Mythic Plus raids. They have not completely dismiss the idea. But yeah, I wouldn't have artifact power drop at the end of a dungeon or off bosses in either dungeons or raids. I would have, you know, from that source, I would have it purely in the weekly chest based on the most difficult stuff that you had done the previous week. As it already is for dungeons, I don't think you need the extra from... I don't think you need it to drop. Because the sort of people who don't want to spam dungeons, I don't think... it used to be the case, but I don't think anymore people are motivated by the AP. I think the people who do lots of dungeons are motivated by getting the gear. The gear is a good enough incentive. Because the best geared people in the world are the ones who do a lot of Mythic Plus and raiding as well. You know. Mythic. Oh, no. I think if they did do Mythic Plus raids, and I'm not sure, that there would be different affixes, I think. The Ulduar system with difficulty levels. It worked pretty well, yes. But it just doesn't fit with the modern raid system now. Obviously, if they did do Mythic Plus raids, it couldn't be of the current expansions raids. That wouldn't work. It would have to be a previous one. It would have to be like, you know, they did with the time walking stuff. That might be possible then. They could do that, I suppose. Break up the raid into different sections and then, yeah, maybe that would work. No, well, that's one issue as well, not intuitive. You effectively do have to read at what to do. But now that we have the raid journal, they could put it in there, you know, how to activate the hard mode. But at the same time, I just don't think it works with this system now. Because we have normal and heroic flex system, which is a good way of doing it. And it's only mythic, the hardest system with the fixed raid size. So it doesn't really work in that system anymore. Unless, of course, because there is effectively already one of those for achievements, isn't there? But people tend to do those achievements on an easier, earlier mode. But anyway, we'll come sort of towards the end of it now, so I'll do the usual thing and like give it 5 minutes if people want to throw anything else into the hat there. And then I'll do the usual top and tailing of this and stick up on YouTube. And then work out which videos I'm going to do tomorrow. I've given myself a small little list of things to do this week, but I mostly need to make sure I get some rest before I get back to work. Mythic raids will be even more burnt out, yes. That is an issue, certainly. If it depends what the raids are for. The rewards are for it. If the rewards are not that much, like if it's cosmetic or something, it's not much of a problem. A bit like doing the achievements, because it could replace the achievements, couldn't it? And that's cosmetic. You don't have to do that. Like there's some times when I haven't done it just because I've not been that bothered. Like I didn't do it for Blackrock Foundry. How come there aren't any world first rewards for raids? Well, you get to say your world first. You get to go on final boss. And you tend to get invited to events as well. You're marketable. I don't think there needs to be a reward, a monetary reward. About the fish thing, no, I don't. Well, I don't know anything about it. I'm not saying that there isn't any more information. Wowhead would be the best place to check on that, but no, I haven't seen anything new on it, I have to say. Usually for my news on these things, I tend to just keep an eye on MMO Champion on the front page, and then if I see something of interest and want some more information, I tend to go across to Wowhead if it's not something I've seen myself in the PTR. But Wowhead do have a section on the PTR stuff. Yeah. No, I don't know any more details. I've only just recently, of course, those who are watching me stream like on the Saturdays will know I've only just recently got myself the Suramar, the lavish Suramar feast recipe, and it's still only rank 1. I keep feeding Naomi loads of stuff. I've got some more patterns since then, but not any rank 2 or 3 feasts. I'm getting a little bit tired of Naomi again. But then again, I did leave it very late in the tier to get it. I know. Well, we already had someone in the guild who can make them. We gave them their own rank in the guild. They have the rank of cookie, and they are allowed access to the guild bank tab where we put all the materials to make the feasts. Naomi is appalling. But then again, I keep saying to people, I don't know why people are so surprised, because 1, he was taught by us, and 2, like when he stands in the kitchen, he has his frying pan by his side, and the food doesn't even fall out of it. You know, so the fact that we get burnt food from him should come as no surprise at all. It's burnt to the pan. What should be a surprise is that he's able to scrape it out of that pan and into our bags. I think it's like a world first guild, a 30-day ticket for the game. I think that would be considered. The problem is, if you're going to reward the world first guild, it has to be something of significant value. I mean, not £1 million, that's just silly. But, you know, it'd have to be of significant value. And then you've got to say to yourself who would be eligible. Because it wouldn't be fair to make it just the 20 people who killed the final boss. Because what about the people who were part of that roster and maybe swapping in and out? How many people can you allow in the roster that would get the benefit? And who, if you decide to go for a larger roster, blah, blah, there's so many complications in it. They'd also have to very, very seriously crack down on cheating. You know, obviously all this issue about certain people getting banned for certain things and not others that were doing the same thing has been a talking point, but no more than that. Now, if there were actual monetary reward at stake, the emphasis would be on Blizzard. You know, when you go from sort of an amateur thing to a professional thing, the emphasis on making sure that it's a fair race would be much more intense. But so I think there are difficulties with rewarding the world first race that are not such an issue with their own iSelect competitions like the Mythic Plus Dungeon competition and, you know, the other esporty type stuff. That's more easily controlled and easier to make sure the rules are being followed. And also it's very straightforward how many people in the team there are because you dictate it. You can't dictate how many people should be in a roster for doing raids, which are going to take a couple of weeks. But anyway, I'm going to call it a day there. Thanks for coming on. I'll be on streaming tomorrow with our new recruits. I've sort of given up hope of getting any more new recruits by tomorrow now. But I am still hoping to find some ranged. But anyway, I'll see you later. Thanks for coming.